Appalachian Sustainable Development. We are a nonprofit based in Bristol, Virginia, and our mission is to help transition Appalachia to a more resilient economy and healthier population by supporting local agriculture, exploring economic opportunities, and connecting people to healthy food. And so we've partnered with Herbalachia, the School of Herbal Medicine based in Tennessee, to bring you this Seed to Medicine Chest webinar series. And so this series was originally planned as an in-person workshop with the goal of serving our local community here. But due to the current COVID-19 and ongoing health crisis, we've transitioned to a virtual setting, hopefully to reach even more people and share information on medicinal plants. So we think that this information is really important, and we are trying to get this information out there so we can give you the info on how to promote health and wellness in your everyday life with things that you can do at home. And so a part of ASD's work and the agroforestry department at Appalachian Sustainable Development is the Appalachian Harvest Herb Hub. And this project reflects our commitment to our community and the special plants we're caring for here in Appalachia. And it's a shared use facility that allows local farmers to bring in their sustainably cultivated herbs to market. And through sustainable growing and trainings and harvest trainings, we offer cost share opportunities, shared use processing equipment, and we can then collect and market this supply in an aggregated way to larger buyers. And so your participation in joining us today actually allows us to continue the work that we're doing and offer further assistance to even more farmers of Appalachia. So thank you for joining us. You can find more information on our website, asdevelop.org/agroforestry. So officially, I'd like to welcome you to Seed to Medicine Chest. This is Infused Oils and Salves with Michelle Bouton. So go from there.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Michelle Bouton, and I'm an acupuncturist in Johnson City, and I'm also an herbalist, do herbal medicines with my patients, and then also have the Herbalachia school that we teach people how to identify plants, how to harvest them in the wild or grow them in the backyard, and then bring them indoors and turn them into products, things that could be shared with friends and family, or even start a small business. We've had several of our graduates that sell products at the farmers markets these days or have their online stores. So it makes me really happy to see people connecting with the plant world, because that turns them into stewards of the plant world, so with some conservation efforts for the plants. So today we're going to be working with some oils and salves. I'm excited to get into all this stuff with you. We'll be making some little tins of salves. The first thing, I just want to go to some slides and we'll go through some safety and introduction stuff first. So Sierra. So welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and start off with some safety features. These were also in the last webinar, and you will find them on the bottom of page 2 of your handouts. So safety and precautions. So whenever you're making products to give to someone else, or especially if you're going to be putting them on the market, you need to be aware that there are some guidelines that you need to be following as far as safety and letting people know the ingredients in there. Today with the oils and salves, one of the things in particular that we'll need to be careful of are people that have nut allergies, because a lot of these oils are derived from nuts. So for people that have nut allergies that results in anaphylaxis, that can be a life-threatening situation. So it's very important to document everything, be very clear about what you're using in your products, be very careful about cross-contamination. We don't want to be using grapeseed oil in one cup and then measure some almond oil or peanut oil in the other cup. So first thing, especially too, if you're harvesting from your backyard or out in the forest, is proper ID. That's something that's very hard to learn on your own, kind of like learning to dance from a book. So I would encourage any of you to maybe join a local plant club. There's an amazing Master Gardeners group in East Tennessee that's always very eager to share information to learn about how to properly identify plants. And then also, if you are growing them in your backyard, just being very careful about where you buy your seeds from, whether they're certified seeds, or also buying them from like a nursery that's very careful about labeling with botanical identification. So today we'll be working with lavender, and I brought a couple of different kinds of lavender for us to look at. So just be very careful about your identification, and then also the names, because a lot of times what I may call lamb's ear, somebody else may have a totally different name for it. So using common names is another way for us to get mixed up quite a bit. So if you're making products, giving them to people to put on their body or take inside their body, or if you're selling them especially, you want to be very clear about, be very precise about the names and which products you're using. So another thing would be harvesting clean plant material. We discussed this a little bit last time as well. If you are into foraging, if you enjoy tromping through the woods and the fields and gathering your plants there, that's a great way to get outside. That's probably 90% of why I went into herbalism. It's another great excuse to get outdoors. But just be careful when you're harvesting that you go to places where the plant material would be free of pollutants and chemicals. So the two places that I always think of especially are on the roadsides or beside the train tracks or under power lines. All those are usually sprayed quite a bit. And especially on the roadsides, even if someone hasn't sprayed there, you've got the automobile traffic coming every day and putting carbon on those plants. So that would not be a great place to harvest, even though, we drive by and we see the elderberry and it's so tempting, it's so beautiful, it's right there. But we don't want all that pollution on our products, especially since we're putting it into a product that's going to concentrate the chemicals of it, and then we're going to be putting it on our body. So obviously we don't want to be putting that on our body. The other place that I would caution people, especially for harvesting, is around houses. Even if it's an abandoned home 100 years ago with lead paint and chemical sprays, all that kind of stuff, I would just suggest not harvesting anything around homes. So another thing with making herbal preparations is to consider special populations. So today with the oils and salves, typically that's used topically. I mean, sometimes we might mix them in with a salad dressing or something like that to get the oils in the body. But a lot of times we will be using them topically, so it's not as much danger, I would kind of guess, as a tincture formula, and not quite as concentrated as a tincture formula. So we still need to be careful though, and like I said, the nut allergies would be the big thing for the oils and salves. And then also knowing your herb-drug interactions. If someone is taking, for example, an SSRI, it's going to make them a little bit more sensitive to the sun. Their skin's going to be a little bit more sensitive. And then things like St. John's wort oil or any of the citrus oils can also make your skin photosensitive. So if you put a citrus oil on and you go out in the sun, you're going to have more of a tendency to get sunburn or have increased redness there. So just some things to keep in mind. If you do decide to continue on and learn more about making herbal preparations, I would encourage you to dive into these topics as well. They're very important, and it's going to improve your professionalism and also keep us out of trouble from injuring anybody. Okay, our next slide just talks a little bit about the infused oils. We'll be going over these today. So for internal use, we can use it for medicinal or for nutrient foods. So for medicinal use, one of the cultures that uses this quite a bit is Ayurveda, which is based in Indian medicine. And so they would be creating a lot of medicinal oils and then have people using the oils, either taking a tablespoon of them or maybe mixing that medicated oil in with some rice or lentils or something like that. And they would be taking that as far as enhancing their diet, creating maybe a cooling or a warming oil. The other thing is like a nutrient food, and I mentioned using it in salad dressings. You could just mix it with a flavored vinegar, and that's another way to get the oils for internal use. And obviously, taking oils internally, you probably need to be a little bit more careful with the sensitivities, allergies, those types of things, because there's no way to get it out once you get it in. So external use as well. So topical application, it's absorbed through the skin. These types of oils are used a lot in skincare and bath products. So, and then also you can have it for medicinal use. I was cooking for a dinner party the other day and got a big burn on my hand. So I've been putting a big glop of a medicated salve on there and wrapping it up at night. And it's really helping heal it quite a bit. So, and then also the oils, infused oils, can be used as a base. So in here I've got the salves and creams, ointments. You can make lip balms out of the oils, and again, bath products and lotions. I just ordered a foaming bath salts product the other day and noticed that it has some different types of oils in it. So I'm always on the lookout too for some really interesting recipes and how to combine these things. And also I feel like if you can find ways in your daily life to increase the natural products that you know are suitable for your body, either as a, medicinal, it suppresses symptoms or something like that. If maybe we have really dry skin on our elbows, if we can start incorporating a specific oil that is helpful for moisturizing, that's just gonna help us down the road. So it's basically a preventative care. All right, let's see. So let's go. I did want to mention a couple things about essential oils. That's not on the slide. It is on your handout on page 1. So essential oils, they're completely different than the infused oils that we're going to be doing today. Essential oils are taking the plant material and using, I forgot the word.
I don't know either.
Distillery. So they're distilling the plant material and they're separating the oil in the plant from the water that's in the plant. So the water from the plant ends up being also very fragrant, and it's marketed as a hydrosol. So you may have seen those. It's kind of like a face mist or a room spray. It's a water-based. It maybe has a little bit of oil in it, but then the oils that come out of there are very, very concentrated. And I think I put on your sheet here, so it takes 13 pounds of peppermint leaves to produce 1 ounce of essential oil. And if you figure, leaves are very lightweight. So if we had a box, maybe this big, of peppermint leaves, that would probably be 1 pound. So can you imagine like 13 pounds of peppermint leaves just to get that one little tiny bottle, which is really amazing for products like, or for plants like peppermint or lemon balm that are easy to grow. They're almost like weeds. They are weeds in my garden anyway. So that's not a problem, but think about the more rare species like the sandalwood or some of the rare ones that come from India. And just looking in your, medicine chest, if you have 10 or 20 or 30 essential oils in there from all around the world, and it takes, this much plant material just to get you that little bottle of oil. I would never say, don't use those. They're very precious, but just be aware of what it takes to create that product and use it reverently. Use it as something that's very precious, even though it may cost us $12 or $15. And harvesting it from the plant world, that's a pretty big investment there. And I just looked up before the class, it actually takes 22 pounds of rose petals to equal one little 5 milliliter bottle. Let's see, so this is 15 milliliters. So a third of this for 22 pounds of rose petals. So I just tell you that not to, make us feel guilty about using it, but just to appreciate and have some reverence for the concentration of that. So, and that being so concentrated, you need to have a very particular respect for how concentrated that is. Most of the oils are not safe to use directly on the skin. You need to have a little bit of a carrier oil, like an ounce of oil, and put 2 or 3 drops in there of the essential oil and blend that together, and then it's safe for topical application. With the essential oils too, the photosensitivity caution also exists. So I really enjoy the citrus oils like the lemon and grapefruit and bergamot, but they do make your skin more sensitive. So just be aware of that if you're planning to go outside. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the base oils. So the first thing I would say is make sure when you're using it for application on the body, internal or external, be sure to buy organic. The oils, like we said, they concentrate pesticides and herbicides. So you want to make sure that you're not getting those agricultural chemicals rubbed all over your body. That's kind of counterproductive there. For the same reason, I would suggest using unrefined oils, either expeller press or cold press. Those are basically the same processing. So the more processing you have, the more chemicals you're going to have in it. If you don't do a pressed, if the extraction is not pressing, then they're using chemicals to extract the oil. So the unrefined is the best way to get less chemicals from your oils. And again, I mentioned the nut allergies. We'll go over that a little bit more when we get to the chart. We'll look at that together of the base oils that I'll be commenting on. Some other things to be aware of, and this is in your notes as well, is some of the oils have thinner textures than others. So the thinner ones are actually better for like a massage situation. If you're wanting to use it as an after bath oil, or if you're wanting to prepare your own herbal formula of scents that you like and take it to your massage therapist and have them use it for you or something like that, I would suggest using the thinner oils. It's got a little bit better glide to it. Whereas the thicker ones are going to be more protective of the skin. Like for example, you might, use it for your lip balms to put over your lips or over your elbows and heels before you go to bed at night, because it's going to kind of stick to the skin a little bit more thoroughly there. Oils will last for several months or about a year when it's protected from air, light, heat, and moisture. So if we put it in a jar, we want to fill the jar up as full as possible. So like for example, this would not be optimal if I had made several jars of this lavender oil and I was only going to use one of them today to do the salves. Then the other jars, I would want to fill it all the way up to the rim and screw it on there so that there's less exposure to the air. I would probably go ahead and put it in the refrigerator because it's infused with the plant material already. So this is going to last a little bit longer, just the regular oil, than the oil that already has the plant material in it. You can also invest in some amber bottles that would be protecting it from the light. But I've also heard of people just putting this in a paper bag, writing what it is on the outside of it, and then you can store it that way as well. Okay. What's that?
Next slide.
Yeah. So when we take the oil and then transition it to a salve, which basically is just going to mean adding an emulsifier, a wax, or resin, then we get some different benefits there. So by choosing our base oil carefully, depending on what the result we want, we can add some different features to our lotions or salves. So the oils and salves both soften the keratin layer of the skin, and then adding the beeswax or the thickener holds the medicine in place on the skin a little bit better. So if we apply oil to a place on our skin, it's going to kind of drip off a little bit, absorb a little bit. But if we have a salve that's a little bit thicker, it's going to stay in that place a little bit better. One of my favorite things to do is just to put a big blob of the salve on there and get these new waterproof Band-Aids. Get the bigger ones and then just slap that on there, and the salve is going to be really concentrated on that area that needs it. Some of the folks from our herb class will also remember that you can use yarrow. The leafy leaves from the yarrow plant is a great styptic, so it helps stop any bleeding. It also invigorates the blood. So you can take the yarrow leaf, put it on the injury, and then put a bandage over that. Or adding the salve, then the leaf, then the bandage. Okay, let's look at some supplies here. The supplies are going to be on page 2 in your handout. I'm going to have to use my glasses today. So we'll have some herb material. Today we're going to be using dried lavender. Let's pop that up there here. So this lavender was harvested locally here. You can see the little sticks of it. And maybe I can hold it up there. There we go. And this is a Munstead lavender, and I've been told that it does a little bit better in our area as far as producing flowers. This is another type of lavender. It doesn't have the blooms on it yet. It's just one I had outside here. And this is called French lavender, which I just love the shape of the leaves there. It's so pretty. And both of them, the leaves are very fragrant, but the flowers are what we'll be using for our product today. Another plant that I use very often in my salves is comfrey. So these are the comfrey flowers. Some of the smaller leaves here, these flowers, the blossoms have already come off. But typically when I'm using comfrey for salves, I'll just use the top 6 or 8 inches of the plant. So you'll get the flowers, a few of the smaller tender leaves, and then I'll also chop up the stalk as well with it. And so any of that, I would just be taking it and then mincing it up really finely, because with the oils and salves, we want to have as much surface area as we can for the oil to absorb. Okay, so knife and cutting board. I've already prepared the oil today, so we won't be cutting up the plant material today, but we will be straining the oil and then turning it into a salve by adding the beeswax. The gram scale, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. Today we'll actually be using the ounces, so if you are getting a scale for home use, I would suggest getting one where you can switch back and forth between ounces and grams, just to have that flexibility with the different products that you'll be using. Our batch log book, which this is my batch log book, and I just keep one sheet in here per herbal product that I'm making. And it has all the different questions on here of everything I need to record for this product. So the name of the preparation, the herbs used, solvents, processing equipment, date, batch number, reference page number, the usage or dosage, and then the yield, the date, weight and volume, and critique results. So this, a template of this form, we went over this at the last webinar, but so many people were interested in it, I decided to share the PDF with you guys. So this is somewhere on our webinar there that you will be able to download this PDF and just print out blank copies for you and start a logbook at home. I would highly recommend doing this. This is not one of the more exciting parts of making herbal formulas, but it's great to be able to look back and figure out why did this salve, why did the aroma of this salve go away quicker than the one I made last year, or why is this one more green than that one? And over the years, if you're tweaking bit by bit, this type of information, having those details is going to be really valuable to you. Let's see, labels and markers. You can see my very simple label for the oil here. Because I'm turning this into a different product, this is kind of a temporary label, so it doesn't have all the specific information that I need. All that would be in the logbook. A maceration jar, so I just use quart jars. Sometimes I'll use a half-gallon jar if I'm making a larger batch. A stainless steel pot or ceramic cook pot. So a lot of herbal preparation books or teachers will tell you to have a dedicated piece of cookware to use with wax. I have personally found that these red copper pots are really good for cleaning up. It's got a non-stick interior, and even though it's a little bit of work to wipe it out, once I clean it out, I feel like it's pretty safe for food use. And even if I do get a tiny little bit of wax in the next thing I'm cooking, because I'm using everything all organic and chemical free, that doesn't really bother me. So it's really just up to your personal preference. But this non-stick surface I've just found does really well with wax preparations. A Pyrex measuring jar with a handle. So you'll see, I'm sure most of you have 2 or 3 of these in your kitchen probably. So you'll see today why this is so helpful. Trying to pour into a small salve jar from a pot is not very helpful. So I just end up pouring it in here and then pouring from there because it's got a nice spout on it. These two are really nice because they have the ounces and cups on one side and then the metric measurements on the other side. So again, depending on which system you're going with for this particular preparation, you've got some flexibility there. Oil and salve jars, dark color or metal is best. So for friends and family, these are just the size of 10 jars that I have. This is a 2-ounce jar. I really would recommend getting a screw lid, especially if you're planning on carrying it around in your purse or something like that, or putting it in a backpack or a suitcase. This one actually has a little foam interior too, so it keeps anything, if it does liquefy in the heat, it's going to keep it from spilling out. But the screw lids are really nice just to keep it from popping apart. This is another little tiny one that I've found that I like a lot. Again, the inside of it has the little foam to keep it from dripping. And this is a good size just to carry in your purse, or I like to put it in my nightstand, maybe rub it on my cuticles before I go to bed, that type of thing. and you'll see my very professional labels there. Like I said, these are just ones that I give away for friends and family. So today, I'm super excited. I am getting ready to make my salves for the year to sell here at the clinic, and I found these little rose tins that are super cute. They don't have the screw lids though. That's the one thing I don't like about these. But anyway, that's what we're going to be using today. Let's see, so a tincture press or strainer. I'm just going to be using a regular strainer for home. And then a cheesecloth or bandana to strain. Today, because this is just going to be for my use, I'm just going to be using the strainer and not use the cheesecloth. The cheesecloth basically just keeps any of the really fine plant material from going into the oil. But you can also just wait after you strain it, and then you can wait for the sediment to sink to the bottom and then just pour off the top. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at our handouts. I want to go over some of the information on the base oils with you. With my head chopped off. Let's see. So this is at the top of page 2. Does that work? No, we need the video. It's just my head was chopped off. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Okay. So page 2 on the handouts, it has a little chart here of the different base oils that are the ones that are most commonly used for herbal medicine purposes. So I do want to bring your attention, we talked a little bit about folks having nut allergies, and as a former massage therapist, that was something I was always very careful of. It's real easy to, pick up a massage oil, take it in there, start using it, and then figure out it has a little bit of almond oil in it, and you don't want to be causing somebody issues like that. So the ones to be careful of here, the almond oil, obviously that's a tree nut. Apricot kernel, that would be considered, some people have crossover with that as well. And then what I found out is that avocado, even though they use the seed inside there, it would not be a caution for people with nut allergies. However, it is in a similar family of people that have latex allergies. So if someone has a latex allergy, then you might want to consider not using avocado oil, or at the very least, make sure that you list the avocado oil on your ingredients list. Castor oil is considered a bean and not a nut, so it's in the legume, so it would not be causing trouble for most people, hopefully. And then surprisingly, I didn't even realize this, coconut does not cause allergies for tree nut allergic folks. It is, well, some people, but I said it's extremely rare. So even though we say coconut, it's not classified as a tree nut. So it would be okay for most people. So let's just start at the top. So the almond oil is a beautiful golden color. It's a little bit thicker oil, so it would have a little bit less slip and glide to it, but it's really good for penetrating into the skin. And maybe that's one of the reasons it does penetrate, is it doesn't spread out as much. It stays more in one place. Apricot kernel would be a little bit lighter weight. This is on this list here, the apricot kernel oil is the one that has a little bit more astringent quality to it. So it kind of tightens and firms up the weave of the skin, like the collagen, the pores. So it's used a lot in commercial beauty preparations, like for the face, under the eyes, with the neck, just to kind of tighten and lift that a little bit. Avocado oil is typically made from the seed and the pulp of the avocado. A little bit of a light green. You're also going to get a little bit of the avocado aroma. So I haven't noticed it being a huge problem in the products, but some people may not want the green smell in their healthcare products. So castor oil, good for very dry skin. It's a good medicinal just in and of itself for skin issues like eczema and psoriasis. Coconut oil, one great feature about that is you don't have to refrigerate it. You can use it for cooking. You can use it for your herbal preparations. If you do buy the unrefined coconut oil, you are going to get a coconut fragrance to it a little bit. So you feel like you're at the beach. So grapeseed oil, that's actually what I'm going to be using today. I haven't used grapeseed oil in a long time, so I just wanted to make a salve with that and kind of see what that would be like. I did use it quite a bit for massage because it's a lighter weight oil and it penetrates pretty well and doesn't leave that greasy feeling on the skin. Jojoba, we call it an oil, but it's actually a wax ester. That's a thin ester. It's probably the closest of this whole list to the sebum, which is the oil, natural oil that our skin creates. So in that way, it's very helpful for not causing breakouts to clog the pores and that kind of thing. And again, that's a good one for not leaving a residue on the skin. Jojoba also, no need to refrigerate it, so that's a good feature, especially if you end up buying, you know, a gallon jug of something and you use half of it, so you've got a half gallon of an oil. I've only got one refrigerator in my house, so you know, if I have 2 or 3 half gallons of oils in there, that's going to start taking up quite a bit of room. And then olive oil is probably the most common one of all of these to be used for just salves in general. It's a fairly low cost compared to some of the other ones. I know like the apricot kernel can be fairly expensive, but if you're just using small amounts of it, like for the face, that would be appropriate. But for olive oil, again, you have kind of a medium weight oil, a rich green color, and a little bit of a kind of a food herbal aroma to it. So it is very shelf stable. And I just wanted to draw your attention to the bottom right block there in the chart. It says EVOO. That's a pretty common abbreviation for extra virgin olive oil. And you will see that in a lot of salve formulas. Again, you want to use cold pressed and not a processed oil. And they do have different pressings, like first pressing, second pressing. So I think a lot of that mostly has to do with the flavor of the oil. So if you wanted to go with a second pressing, that would probably be a less costly option to use for the topicals. Okay, we went over the supplies, and then your safety information is on that sheet as well. So let's go ahead to the next slides here, and we'll talk about the formulas that we're going to use to infuse the oils. So on the top of page 3, we have a 1 to 5 ratio weight to volume. That means 1 part dry plant to 5 parts oil. And note that this whole formula is just for dry plant material. So for example, down at the bottom, I've got 250 grams of calendula flowers. So that would be the dried weight. And to that, if I want to use the extra virgin olive oil, I would be multiplying that by 5 to get the 1250 milliliters. So that would be my formula. And so you apply that ratio. If you want to use 100 grams or 100 ounces, you just multiply that by 5, and then you use 500 milliliters or 5 ounces to get your oil ratio there. Let's go ahead to the fresh plant oil. So you'll notice that the fresh plant oil, we're going to be using more plant material per volume because some of that's going to be water weight. And I do have down at the bottom there that even though we're saying it's fresh, typically what we'll do is we will mince the plant and then let it sit overnight to wilt, and quite a bit of your moisture is going to come out of the plant at that point. Really, your main concern in making oils and salves is to get all of the water out of it so that it doesn't mold. And there's several things we do to make sure that that happens. And the first thing we do is to wilt the plant overnight. If you don't get a chance to mince it up before the night, you just let it sit on the counter, kind of like I have with this, and it'll be nice and floppy the next day, and you can chop it up then. So with the fresh plant, we're going to have a 1 to 3 ratio of weight to volume. So 1 part fresh plant material to 5 parts oil. So our example here, with some higher math, 58.4 grams of fresh yarrow flowers. So probably the flowers, I would just harvest the flowers, let them sit on the counter overnight, and then chop them up the next day. Something a little bit thicker, like the comfrey stalk, would be a good thing to try to chop up the night before, so that a little bit of that juices and liquids can start evaporating out. And then to that, we multiply that by 3, and we come up with 116 milliliters of jojoba oil. Okay, let's go ahead and look at our oil here that I've created for today. So those of you that were at the webinar last week, you saw that I can weigh and measure. So what I did is I just took our measurement of the dried lavender And then because it's a dry plant, I'm adding 5 units of the oil. So here in the oil bottle, pop this up here. So we're starting out with 24 ounces of the oil, but what I did is I actually only used 20 ounces of the oil, and then broke that down to 4 ounces of the lavender. And the reason I did that is so that I have some extra oil left over, and we'll show you why later. You don't want to put all of your oil or all of your beeswax in the combination from the very start, because you want to have a little bit left over to mix back and forth in case you need to thin it or in case you need to thicken it a little bit more. All right, let's see here. So we took the lavender, put it in the jar, poured the oil in, stirred it up. With the tinctures, we talked about having a wax piece of wax paper under the lid, but that's just because the alcohol would eat away at the metal. With the oils, we don't have that problem. Some people choose, if you have the fresh plant material, they would put a cloth over here with a rubber band or something around it and letting some of the moisture evaporate out that way. But because this is dried plant material, I don't have a whole lot of worries about there being a lot of water in there. So this sat for 2 weeks, and now today we have a beautiful oil with some lavender in it. So you can see the nice dark color. And we'll be straining that out. So let's go to the slides about infusing oils. Next one. Okay, yeah. So on page 3 of your handouts, at the bottom, the biggest chart there, I have the steps that you would take, 1 through 13, about how to make an herbal infused oil. And so this slide is just basically a summary that we can go through it easily together. So the first step that you'll have, I just call it centering and gratitude. And I think a lot of us tend to just kind of breeze through that first step. But so being in Chinese medicine, I just want to share one thing with you today. When I was studying, it was probably 2 or 3 in the morning one night, it talked about, it said for every needling, considering acupuncture therapy, the first step is to be rooted in the spirit. So I think basically anything that we do in life, that's going to be a great thing to just kind of gather ourselves, take a deep breath, you know, tell ourselves, okay, just calm down, take things very slowly, 1 step at a time. Maybe centering in why you're creating this, maybe put some intention into your product. Like, you know, I hope that this could be of benefit to those that I serve. I hope it can have healing properties in it, and hoping that everything I do can benefit those people around me. So I also put on your sheets too that many herbalists find that this type of gratitude or grounding practice helps us connect better with the plants. And by connecting with the plants, you know, there's a broad range of things there, everything from being able to talk to the plants. I have people ask me like, well, how do you know, what plant's going to be good for which person, or when to harvest this, you know, is it today or tomorrow? And I think this also helps us just develop that intuition of just having kind of a relationship with the plants so that we know what's going to be of the most benefit to them so that they can help us in our healing efforts. So the next thing would be to get all your equipment ready. So sanitizing and drying your equipment in jars. So really with the oils, making sure that they are completely dry. That includes the lids, the jars, the pots, the spoon. Any bit of water that you put into your formula is going to cause trouble and have a tendency to make it mold. And that's going to spoil the whole batch. So sanitizing, and we don't use the word sterilize. Sterilization is basically unachievable. In a home kitchen, that would be like for a laboratory where there is no bacteria on anything. So we sanitize and we hope for the best. So the next thing we would do is mince the herbs, whether we've let them wilt overnight or it's a dry herb like this. When I prepared this, I just took the lavender and I stripped the flowers off of the little stalks just to give it a little bit more mobility in the pot, because if I put the stalks in there, I'm not going to be able to stir it up as well. And just having the little flowers in there, it's going to be a little bit easier to stir and also to pour in the jar, and then also to strain. It's a lot easier to strain out small bits and pieces than big stalks there. We weigh it, obviously, and then figure out what proportion of oil we want to be using. And depending on how bulky your plant material is, even if you multiply it by 5 and put that oil in there, if there's still plant material sticking up out of the oil, then we need to add more oil, no matter what the measurement is. It won't be as strong a formula, but if there is plant material sticking out, that's going to mold, especially if it's fresh plant material. You need to make sure that it's well covered, and as the plant material absorbs the oil, it's going to fluff up and get bigger as well. So that's why we need to be checking it every day. Okay, so we add the material to the jar, cover it with oil, stir it to release any trapped air, and then we allow it to sit for 2 weeks to infuse. There's lots of different ways or places you can infuse it. These days, something I've heard is using a yogurt prepare, like in your Instapot or something like that. Usually yogurt is prepared at about 110 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is the ideal temperature to infuse oil in. A lot of people can just put this in a windowsill where it's going to be nice and warm. If you do that, it would be great to put it in a place where you're going to see it every day, because you want to open it or look through it, make sure there's no oil in it, give it a little stir or a shake to redistribute the material so that it can absorb evenly. And putting it, you know, on the window in front of where you wash your dishes or something like that is going to be a way where you remember to do that regularly. Typically, if you put it on a stove top or even a crock pot, those heat up to about 150, 160, even on the low temperature, which if I were to put this in a pot on the stove, heat it up to low or the simmer setting, within about 45 minutes, it's going to be simmering, and then the plant material is going to get crispy. I'm going to have sauteed lavender. So, and you don't want to get that kind of fried odor to your plant oil. So what you can do is you can put it on the stove top, put it on low, heat it up for 15 minutes and set a timer, come in and turn it off, let it sit for about an hour, heat it up again for about 15 minutes, do that 3 or 4 times, and that's going to keep it within the, 100 to 130, 140 range there overall. Another way I've heard that I'm not really brave enough to try it, but I have heard people using a crock pot. So we said the crock pot, the low setting is about 150. But apparently there's ways that if you get an electrician, they can help you wire up your crock pot to a dimmer switch. And that gives you more variability, and you can take it even lower than the low setting on there. Like I said, I'm not that brave. Okay, so we check daily just to make sure that all the plant material is under the level of the liquid oil in there, adding more oil if needed, and making sure no mold is present. I would say if mold is present, maybe depending on how much it is, just getting a spoon and scooping it out and hoping for the best. But if it continues to grow back day after day, you're probably going to have to just get rid of the whole batch. Okay, and the next slide. Oh, I didn't mention as well, I said putting it in the digestion jar. So we talk about infusions, and with the tinctures, we talked about maceration. And if the processing is kept within like 100 to 110 degrees, they call that digestion because the oil is digesting the plant material. So we're leaving it for 2 weeks, we're checking for mold and stirring daily, and then at the end we're going to strain. And on your sheet here, I made it very clear that for dried plants, it's fine to go ahead and squeeze the plant material. Squeeze everything you can out of it because it's only going to be oil coming out of it. However, a lot of people recommend if you're using fresh plant material, you've let it digest for 2 weeks, then after you strain it, you just don't want it to let it strain naturally through your strainer. You don't want to squeeze it, because if you're squeezing the plant material, any water is going to be retained in the plant material. And so you don't want to be squeezing water into your freshly created oil. At the end of your straining process, if you want to make a really strongly infused oil, you can go through that whole process again. So what I would do, I would strain the lavender out of this. Once the oil is clear, I would add not fresh, but a new batch of dried lavender to the oil and go through the whole 2-week process again. So basically it's like a double infusion. It's going to make it a really strong oil. And then also the cheesecloth and then the pouring off. After we strain it and we're ready to either use the oil or make it into a salve, We let it sit overnight, and all the sediment's going to settle to the bottom of it. And also any water after the straining is going to settle to the bottom of it. And then the next day we can take it and very carefully strain off just the clear oil, so that in the bottom you'll have the little bit of herbal sludge with a little bit of water. And I said on here, a great way to use that is just pour it to your bathtub at night. You know, that's a great way to use it up. And then of course we want to be labeling with the date, plant parts, plants used, source of material, type of oil, and then anything else that you find interesting. If it was plants that were a gift from somebody else from their garden, you might make a notation of that, you know, where it was growing, if it was in sun or shade. Some people enjoy putting the moon phases in there, or some astrology information. And then of course storing it out of light and heat. All right.
Before we move on to the next part, Michelle, there was just a clarification. It says infused oils screen seems to contradict 1 to 3, but then 1 to 5 and 58.5 in 116 milliliters is 1 to 2. So I guess you can just speak on that.
Okay. So can we do that at the end?
Yeah.
Go back through the slides there. Okay, because that sounds like if it is a mix-up, it's just a math problem. So we'll look at that later.
Sure.
But just to reiterate on the handouts here, and hopefully the slides, let's look at the slides real quick. So yeah, they're correct. So the dried plant material is 1 to 5. That's on the handouts and on the slide, the ratio. And then the fresh plant material is 1 to 3, and that's on the handout and on the slide. So maybe the only problem there would be the 58.4 should be times 3 to equal the milliliters there.
So always check your math.
So I check your math. Okay. Cool. All right, let's see where we were now. Let's go ahead and look at the salve slide. It should say infused oil salve. There we go. Okay. So we've got our oil prepared. We're going to strain that here in just a minute when we get ready to make our salve. And also just to mention that when you're making these infused oils and salves, you don't have to stick to one oil or to one herb, obviously. Hopefully that's obvious, that you could use lavender and comfrey and calendula and a little bit of peppermint and use all that, either dried or fresh. You could use grapeseed oil mixed with jojoba oil. And it could be a result of just whatever happens to be blooming at your house that week. It could be a result of, you know, whatever's in your cabinet at home that you want to use up. Or you could be very specific in your intention, especially if you're a herbal product maker. You could think, well, I want this herbal salve to be very specific for bruises and traumas. I want to get things in there that are antibacterial, antiseptic, that move the blood, increase circulation, and helps cell turnover rate. So you could be very strategic in your choices, or you could just be very practical about what you have at home. So with turning the oil into a salve, we're going to put the oil into the pot. We're going to heat it to about 150 degrees. Speaking of which, I'm going to go ahead and start warming up our hot plate there. We're going to add the wax to it. We're going to test for the consistency using a little tester spoon, and Sierra is going to be my assistant there. And then right before we pour it, we're going to have any additives that we want to make there. So going back to your handouts here, so salves are thicker than oils, and then we talked about how those are helpful to hold the medicine in place. And they can be thickened by different things. So today I brought some beeswax. We've got a little bit of yellow beeswax there. This is white beeswax. And I would say probably it's kind of a choice there. So the yellow beeswax, of course, is going to be less processed, right? Because beeswax is naturally yellow. And typically it's got a little bit of a odor to it. Sometimes we'll even have a little bit of a smoke odor, because that's part of the way that they you know, calm down the bees in the hive while they rob the hive of the honey or the wax. So you could get 100% natural one, or you could get some that's a little, I don't know if it's bleached or if they just separate it. But I would say probably just go ahead and use the yellow, unless you have a real need for it being white. Like if there's a specific product that you want it to be a lighter color, or you think the yellow is not going to mix well with some other product that you're putting in there, you want it to be more of a cooler color in the jar or something like that, then you could use the white. There's also other things. This is cocoa butter. So that's another thickening agent that you could use as well. It's going to be a little bit different proportions than the beeswax. So everything I gave you here today as far as recipes has to do with beeswax. It is the most common one, but there are, so for example, vegans would probably choose to use something other than beeswax, which would mean either the cocoa butter, or I've listed a couple of other things here. Paraffin. Some folks would use that. Of course, that is petroleum derived, so I would choose probably not to use that. Soy wax is possible. Carnauba wax is derived from palm sources. So again, those that are kind of in the conservation efforts and aware of the palm harvesting in South America may choose not to use that just for those reasons. Candelilla wax, sunflower seed wax, and emulsifying wax. So there's lots of different options. I would suggest starting out with beeswax and see how that works for you. And then if you want to experiment a little bit with other ones, kind of, read up a little bit, some blogs and if you have some books at home. Let's see. Also, beeswax in and of itself, just putting it on the skin, warming it up, has medicinal benefit as well. Initially, when I started making salves, I did buy a big brick of beeswax from a local guy out where I live in Limestone Cove, and I'll tell you, it is really hard to shave beeswax with a home grater. I got a couple of busted knuckles from that, and if you're looking for several grams or hundreds of grams of beeswax, that is a lot of work. Maybe there's a more efficient way, in a food processor or something like that. But I did resort to using just the pastilles, which are just little BBs of beeswax. It makes it very easy to measure. Let's see. And then also considering the thickness that you want of the salve. If you want to be able to put the salve on an injury, then you probably want it to be a little bit thinner. You don't want to have to be like grinding it into the sore there. But if you want something like a lip balm you want to stay on there and to protect you from the weather and the elements, then you'd want a little bit thicker salve. You also don't want it melting in your purse. Typically a lip balm is something that you're going to be carrying around with you or have a little bit mobile. And right here, I'm just going to take a moment to show you guys this. I just discovered these in the last year and it is so fun. So this is a little tray for making lip balms. And what you do, they're maybe $10 or $15 online, but you buy the empty lip balm cartridges. You load them in the back here, and I think each tray loads about 50 of them. So you'll have a little lip balm sticking down there. And then after you load all of those in the tray, you'll pour your salve on top of the tray, take the little squeegee. I told you this was fun, right? And you'll just squeegee it back and forth until the salve goes in all of the little tubes. When you're done, you pull it off and you put the caps on the tubes. So pretty magical. Okay, let's see. So our basic recipe for making a salve is 1 cup of the herbal infused oil and 1/4 cup or 1 ounce of the beeswax. So that's a very general formula and it's in most of the different books. I did bring my, I guess, go-to books for salves, and I think 2 or 3 of these were in our webinar last time. So we've got Making Plant Medicine by Rico Check. This one is really great. He also has a seed company that you can order, strictly medicinal seeds. And so you can order those online. And this was the one, let's see, I think I showed you last time that one of his children illustrated it. So it's got great little drawings in here. And he goes through all the different, tinctures, salves, vinegar, glycerites, teas, decoctions. So it's got a whole bunch of different information in here. And Rico's been doing this for a long, long time. So this is kind of one of the classics. Rosemary Gladstar as well. Most people have heard of her. Hers, I would say, is a little bit more storytelling type and why she does what she does. But then she also gives a lot of really great recipes in here. Another easy one to find. This, I think, is probably my favorite book for medicine making, especially for beginners starting out at home. He's a very easy to read. It's kind of a really interesting sense of humor, but also, again, like the Rico checkbook, he has all the different chapters in the front: macerations, tinctures, wine infusions, ointments, salves, lotions. So basically any kind of herbal medicine product that you want to make, he's got information here. And there's lots of great charts. He's very specific about it. And he's also very specific about the technical aspects of it, as well as the conservation issues that as herbalists, we need to start considering. So the last one I used for this class is Organic Body Care Recipes. This was a book that I picked up just recently. It does have, I would say this book has a lot of different ideas about different products you can make, especially if you're wanting to go into the herbal product business or starting up your online business for markets or whatnot. It has a lot of different ideas about things that you could sell and different, blends of this herb or this herb. I will say that this book, my one disappointment was that it's mostly essential oil based. So it will say, oh, take the grapeseed oil and the beeswax and now add 10 drops of lemon essential oil and 10 drops of lavender essential oil. So it's not really based on using the actual herbs themselves. But some people, if you're the kind of person you're just making it at home for yourself and you want to create different products from your essential oils shelf, then that would be a great reference tool. Okay. So let's go ahead and go back to our oils chart here at the bottom about how to make the oils. Let's see, can we go to the slide? Next one. There we go. Okay, so this is making the oil salve. We warm it, we melt in the wax. Again, we talked about test the consistency. And then pouring very quickly, getting our labels on there, and then make sure you save plenty of time for cleanup, because it is a pretty lengthy cleanup process afterward. Okay, we are ready to make the salve. Yay! Get my little world cleaned up here. All right, so like I said, this oil has been infusing for a while and it's ready to be strained out. We're a few days late, but that's okay. This is typically the size of strainer I use if I'm making a smaller batch, or if I'm making maybe a batch that I want to sell and I want to have less sediment in there. I might even use a tea strainer, which is just a little bit finer mesh than my typical like pasta strainer to use at home. All right, bottoms up. So if we have any questions, Sierra, this might be a good time while I'm just straining and getting things warmed up.
No questions so far, but we might want to go back into the calculations at the end.
Okay.
But yeah, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and use that Q&A button and we can address those while we're going through this process now.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what kind of oils and salves that you guys have tried before, or any issues that you've come up with that you would like. Maybe I have some answers for it. All right, I think I'm going to do this.
All right. Question is there an advantage to using fresh over dried material or vice versa?
I would say for oils and salves, the preference is to use dried over fresh, probably, just because the biggest risk or challenge in making it is to get rid of any possibility for mold. I guess the only problem there would be if you want to make it that day and you haven't wilted it overnight. That would be, the reason that I would think of to use fresh material. I'm not always the best in planning ahead for something. All right. So we're going to be letting that warm up a little bit there. Let me check. I had it on high, which we don't want. I'll go ahead and put it on medium now. And so I measured before, and we have 2.5 cups of the infused lavender grapeseed oil. I do have a little bit of the grapeseed oil left in case we need to add more of it later. And so now I'm going to want to have 2.5 ounces of the beeswax. So while that's warming up, I'm going to take out my scale, change it to ounces.
And we got another question,
Yes.
And that's, does the long, slow heat method help drive off the moisture?
It does. Yeah, you want it long and slow. That way it helps the moisture evaporate, but also it keeps the plant material from frying in the oil. Let's see, 2.5. So like I said, this recipe of the 1 cup oil to 1/4 cup or 1 ounce of beeswax is a standard recipe, and you're going to need to tweak that depending on the thickness of the oil, and I guess there may be different qualities to the beeswax too, or especially if you're choosing to use something else like the cocoa butter. And even I found, like, if I'm infusing oil, if I'm infusing plant material into the coconut oil, which is already a solid at room temperature, then I'm going to need a lot less beeswax to thicken it up. So this is kind of a general formula to start with, and we're going to show you how to test the consistency, and then you'll be able to tweak it either way. All right, do you want to get this close up here? I'm going to go ahead and add this too. So I'm going to add the
So while this is warming up, I just want to keep an eye on it, keep stirring it a little bit. I have had the little pellets clump up in one big ball on the bottom of it if I didn't stir it enough. So again, the low and slow.
Wondering, where do you get your beeswax? Could you show us that up close again?
Absolutely.
And she said she's never made oils or salves before.
Okay. But actually both of these I bought off of Amazon just because shopping has been a little limited the last few weeks. Beesworks, and I went on Amazon and just read the reviews of people that were very satisfied with it. I think that's where a lot of small businesses buy their bulk products. So Beesworks had some really great reviews. This is the other Beesworks. This is the white beeswax, the pellets. That's what we're using today. I didn't have enough of the yellow to go with this. The stuff's starting to look like cream of wheat over here. And then Nuvia is another one online. I'm not sure if they have beeswax or not, but this is where I get the cocoa butter. And you can see these are little pastilles. Let me open that up. So this is the pastille, which also melts very easily. Actually, the cocoa butter is kind of melting in my hand already. And then these are the pellets. So both of those are very easy to weigh and to get to dissolve in the oil. All right, Sierra, it's time to test it.
All right, we'll get back to your questions in a second, but here we go.
All right, so I'm gonna scoop a little bit of the liquid salve into this spoon. I'm gonna set it on a paper towel and give it to Sierra to take back and put in the freezer for a second. So our freezer is in the other room. So, and I've got on your sheet, let's pop this up in a second. There we go, the talking head. So Sierra's gonna cool that off for a little bit for us so we can test the consistency of it. It takes a long time for this oil to cool down and then warm up. You know, if we wanted to test this whole pot, it would take probably 3 or 4 hours for it to cool down enough for us to see what the consistency is gonna be like at room temperature. So the easiest thing to do is just get a little scoop of it, put it in the freezer for about 30 seconds, and then pull it out and test it with your fingertips. And that's going to allow you, just to cool a small bit of it down so you can see what it's going to be like at room temperature. And then that's why I said to save a little bit of the oil and a little bit of the beeswax, because if your test salve is too thin, then you're going to need to add more beeswax to it. And if your test is too thick, you're going to want to add a little bit more oil to it. And so for purposes of a product that you're going to be selling, if it's a grapeseed oil product and you need to thin it down, but you've just run out of grapeseed oil, that means you're going to have to put another ingredient on your label. So, if you're adding canola oil to the salve, you have to list that as well as the grapeseed oil. Okay, so we've got it out of the freezer. So that was just, 30 seconds in the freezer. It does have a little bit of a soft spot right there in the middle, you can see, but let's test it and see. Oh yeah. So it's got a little bit of firmness to it. And even when I touched it, my finger kind of broke through the top of it, almost like a little layer of ice on there. And so to me, that means, the surface of it is cooling really well. And the fact that it's holding its shape on my fingertips, hopefully you can see that, it's kind of sticking up a little bit like Vaseline. So even on the body temperature, it is a salve. It's thick enough there. All right, so I'd say we're good. Well, I got lucky. First try today. I've had some times where I went back and forth with that, trying to get it the right thickness. And so today, just for some fun, since I'm using this for home use, Mom, your birthday is coming up. Guess what you're getting? I'm going to put just a few drops of lavender oil in here. And then I also brought some rosemary oil. So on your sheet there, I listed a few different products that you can use as a preservative in your salve. So some herbalists, I know, for example, Rosemary Gladstar said that she never uses preservatives in her products. She just makes very careful, very sure that there's no moisture in her jars, the lids, the pot, the plant material. And her theory is that the better you get at making sure there's no moisture in your product, that you don't need any preservatives. And I would say, if I was somebody that made batch after batch after batch every month, then I might try to start easing toward that as well. But being someone that's more of a teacher and I don't really have a product line or whatnot, and I'm using different products every time, I like to experiment a little bit and have different types of things to give to people, then I'm not going to be as precise every single time because I'm not being consistent with what I'm using. So I do kind of enjoy either putting a vitamin E oil. You can get the little vitamin E capsules at the store. And what I do is I just poke it with a little pin or knife and squirt, maybe 1 capsule in for every cup of oil, something like that. Very small amount. It doesn't have to be much. Also, rosemary oil is really good as a preservative. Of course, tea tree oil is excellent as a preservative to keep any bacteria from forming. But you don't want all of your salves to smell like tea tree oil, honestly. If it is like a bug bite type of salve, that's fine. But some of them, like if you're wanting a salve that's more of a relaxation or something like that, or maybe a migraine formula that you can put around your head and neck, you don't want to smell tea tree oil all day. So let me get this set up and we're going to pour the salve in the jar. All right, so I've got my little tins laid out here. I try to get them nice and close together so there's less chance of dripping there. And I do need my pot or my Pyrex jar. So if I'm doing a big batch and I have a big soup pot full of oil, I would just use this and scoop it out and then pour it in there. What I'll do is scoop it out and then I scrape the bottom off on there and then I pour. But today, because I have a smaller amount, I'm gonna, let's see. Set that on a towel so we don't get oil on our hot plate there. And pouring it, the first few, I do usually pick them up just because you can't tip the jar over quite enough to get there. Ooh, those are hot. And so you can see, oops, had a spill. You can see I do have a little bit of sediment in some of those there. I guess another way to do that better would be just to not fill my pouring jar up quite as full. But this is staying nice and thin while I'm pouring it. Some of the thicker oils, or maybe if I had added more beeswax for a thicker salve, it would already be starting to cool off and solidify in the jar there. You can kind of see on the edges of the jar there that it's starting to thicken up. And even though this is not very exciting for you guys, I'm going to go ahead and use the rest of this up just because it's already liquid. Okay, I have just a tiny bit. So I think what I'm going to do is just top off a few of these others real quickly. And of course, if you're making product, you're going to try to make them all as consistent as you can as far as the amounts. Okay, great. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 tins from our 20 ounces of oil that we used. I'm going to let these cool off for just a second. There was one little final touch I wanted to show to y'all. But we did add the little bit of lavender oil and a little bit of rosemary oil, stirred that a little bit, and then put it in the jars. At the bottom of your, let's see, page 4, I did include a couple of recipes that I thought might be helpful for you guys. There's an antifungal salve, which I did put a caution on there. I've never made this salve, but I just thought it sounded really interesting because it uses the black walnut hulls. The green outer part that you kind of tear off with your hands before you get to the walnut. That stuff is so bitter and so astringent, and it's very antibacterial. And obviously antifungal as well. So you're going to make it, it's probably going to smell pretty raunchy, but you know, this would be one that you might want to put in the little tiny jars. And something like that, I would probably tell people, you know, antifungal, you're probably going to be using it on your feet or somewhere specific on your body, a lot of times around the nails or the feet. And I would probably tell people to put it on the nails or the feet at night and then put some socks on, some dark colored socks so that they won't get stained. And so that you're going to have it on your body, you know, for 7 or 8 hours at a time. Whereas using it during the day where you're walking and that kind of thing is going to be a lot harder, especially, you know, ladies with sandals or stockings or something like that. It'd be hard to keep it on the body. The other one is a trauma salve. This is a pretty standard combination of herbs that we use in herbal medicine. So calendula, arnica, and the SJW, that's abbreviation for St. John's wort oil. So those 3 flowers, and then adding the beeswax. And he doesn't really say, you know, what kind of oil to use for that. So that would be up to you what oil you want to infuse those flowers in. And then you obviously you could use the beeswax, or you could use another thickener as well. So those are just some extra recipes that you can try just to kind of get you creative and thinking. And that would be a great reason too for, you know, when in the springtime when you're picking out specific plants or seeds that you want to grow in your yard, maybe put a little thinking into, you know, what type of salves or oils would I like to make? What are some conditions that my family has that we could try using some herbs? You know, if you have some kids with really stinky feet, or your family is really into sports or swimming or something like that, and they have a lot of toe fungus or something like that going on. Or if you have, you know, somebody that has a really physically demanding job, like if they're a landscaper or something, or coming home with tight shoulders, then a trauma salve would be really good at keeping the circulation moving. And so that would be a good one for people with sore muscles as well. So let me test this here. The little final touch I wanted to share with you guys today. I actually learned this from a couple of my students. So shout out to Leslie and Mickey with their salves that they're creating, is they just put a little tiny herb on the top of the salve. So a little flower, or I'm just going to add a little tiny piece of lavender. I pinched these tops off earlier. And there's no purpose to this other than it's just pretty. It makes you smile. And also it would help you identify what type of salve it is. Whoops. Somebody got two in that one. Let's see. A couple more. All right, there we go. There's our lavender salves. And I've got the lids in the back there, but obviously we need to let them cool off before we put the lids on them. The only other kind of practical thing I might share with you is I have, if you do have an oil that starts to thicken up on you before you're able to pour them all, I'm really surprised these are staying liquid for so long. But if you have one that's starting to harden up and you're scooping it out of the jar and blopping it in there, and you get, you know, a salve jar that's not looking very pretty, it gets a little bit lumpy or some clumps in it or whatnot. Or if you're adding a flower on top and it, you know, goes off to the side or something like that, then if it starts hardening up, you can either put it in the oven on the broil and it will melt the top of it. Or I've also used a hairdryer in the bathroom and just kind of remelted the top, and it'll help it settle down to a smooth surface. Sometimes too, if you're in a real strongly air conditioned room and the inside of the salve stays liquid and the outside hardens quicker, you'll get a crust on the top and then it'll have a big divot in it. And so after it all firms up and cools to room temperature, again, you can broil it or use a hairdryer, and that's only for aesthetics if you just want a perfectly smooth top on it. All right, let's see. So the only other thing I'll point out is our salve label from the slides. We went over this pretty thoroughly last time as well. And I think with the, you know, with the topicals and with it being an oil or salve, this is a little bit less important than the tinctures. Salves, I would say, are used more, like we say, for skin care, cosmetic, just personal care, as opposed to medicinal. You will be using this for some medicinal uses. So maybe you wouldn't have to be quite as thorough with these, but still at the bottom, so we'll see July 1st to July 15th. That would be the day the oil is created, and then the day it should be strained. And then when you're turning it into a salve, you would refer back to the day the oil is created, and then look out about 8 months to a year if you're going to put an expiration date on your product. So I've got the batch number, so I can refer back to my logbook for exactly specifically what I did and what equipment I used. I've got the Latin names of the two plants, so calendula and then comfrey. Because it's dry plants, I've got the 1 to 5 proportions, 1 part herbs to 5 parts weight of the oil, and then I've got the type of oil I used and where I bought it from. Let's see. I think that's all I've got. Do we want to do any questions, Sarah?
Sure. I'm going to save out of for sharing. The one question that we got since was why use additional lavender oil into the homemade infused oil?
I just wanted it to be a little bit stronger. No purpose really. So lavender is one of the herbs and the oils that are used a lot in skincare. Lavender is very healing to the skin. They use it a lot for burn victims. That would have been good for me to use. So it's a great, I think one of the other reasons I use it a lot is it's a very neutral odor. So even, you know, giving it to a man or something like that, he's not going to be super flowery smelling all day. Like some of them, like rose or geranium, are really floral and kind of a feminine smell to them. And some people just, you know, even women, some people are just not into the floral kind of cloying aromas like that. Or if you're, you know, putting something on to wear to work and you have a fragrance-free facility, even though it's a natural fragrance, you might want to keep it a little bit low-key. And I feel like lavender is just kind of a low-key floral that's also beneficial to the skin. It's also unnerving, so it's very calming and relaxing. Some people will put a little lavender sachet in their pillow at night just to smell the aroma. Actually has a sedative effect on the body to calm us down. So no real practical reason. I just wanted it to be a little bit stronger oil. Yeah, anything else?
Yeah, we got a question. Is there a way to get a copy of the label? I'm going to share the herbal preparations report that Michelle made for today, again, in the chat. And am I right that you can just kind of use some of the specifics from that report that you made? Is there anything else that should go on there? Right now it's...
Oh, yeah. So the log report, which she's going to share in a PDF, you can just print out copies of that to start your own logbook at home. And it just has the prompts. You may not need to fill out every one of them. Like, for example, on the second column of the log report, herbal preparation report, it says reference source or page number. So like, for example, with that, if I was using a specific recipe out of one of the books that I had, I might put the page number, like this was my base recipe, but I added 15 drops of lavender oil to it. But if it's a recipe that I'm just making up, I'm just going out in my yard and chopping things down and putting it in a jar with oils that I have on hand, and it's my personal recipe, there would not be a reference page number there. And then as far as what all to put on the labels, I would say go ahead and do your batch log at the same time that you're creating your medicine. But also, I think if you look at page 3 on the handouts, let's see, how thorough did I get? Okay, page 3, number 12 at the bottom, it says label the date, label the jar with the date. So for me, with salves and oils, I think the date is probably one of the most important parts of the labeling there. Because remember, last time we talked about tinctures can be shelf stable for years because it's alcohol based. However, with the oils, because they have a tendency toward going rancid, so if I were to open this bottle and I had a big, strong rancid smell to it, or if I have a jar of almonds and I open it up and it's got that pungent rancid smell, it is totally not usable. There's no way to revive it. It's already started degrading. And actually, if you used it, you would be probably doing some harm to the body because it would have to be detoxing the breakdown of those oils. And those can be very oxidizing. So we know antioxidants prevent cells from breaking down in the body. And so we want to prevent oxidation. And that rancid smell means that oil is already going through an oxidation process. So here on number 12, start with a date because that's super important. The plant name, the parts used, and the plant name. So on my label, I put the Latin name just because that's part of my training. But I would also say that, like at my home with my apothecary of the different herbs I have, I use the Latin names on those jars as well, just because even though it may take me a second to remember, like, oh, what was symphytum? Oh yeah, that's this or here. Every time I do that, I'm making myself more and more familiar with it. So it's kind of a learning process as far as the way I file things as well. So the part used, did I use the root? Did I use only the flowers? Did I use the flowers and, you know, the first few inches of leaves? Sometimes you'll see AGP, which means above ground parts. So anything from the soil up, all of that is used. for above ground parts, or the aerial parts. That's another name for that. The source of the materials, did you buy them online or did you harvest them from a friend's house? Is it fresh or dry material, the type of oil? And as I showed you, I put even where I bought the oil from. And then you have the option of putting in other information, you know, that would just interest you personally.